I never expected my own sister to shove me across a lawyer's office like I was a stranger trying to steal her life. We were just supposed to divide our parents' estate. But when she screamed, "You always got everything. This house should be mine," I realised this wasn't about money. It was about decades of quiet resentment. Everyone froze, even the lawyer. I had bruises on my arm. But her words, they left deeper scars. And what happened after that? Well, even I didn't see it coming. If you've ever felt like the villain in your own family, then this story might be yours too. They say grief brings families together. That's a lie. Grief, in my family, only polished the cracks we'd ignored 4 decades, made them shine like fractures in glass, shimmering in the right light, impossible to look away from once you noticed. The day after Mum's funeral, I stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes from yet another reception lunch that no one had helped clean up. The house still smelled like lilies and roast beef. Outside, Sophie laughed in the backyard with my cousins. A champagne flute in one hand, perfect hair catching sunlight like a halo. You'd think she just closed a deal, not buried our mother. "Claire, you should smile more," Aunt Linda had whispered earlier that day, patting my hand like I was a nervous patient. "You'll worry everyone walking around so serious." I'd nodded and said nothing. That's what I did. That's what I'd always done. The house was still full of guests, drifting through the halls of the home I'd never left. Every room held echoes of birthdays, sick days, silent dinners, and shouted arguments. Though the latter were never spoken of out loud, we were a good family. We didn't raise voices. We suppressed them. My mother used to say we were blessed with harmony, but I knew better. Harmony, in our house, was a performance, a script. And I'd played my part so well, even I started to believe it. Until I heard my father say the thing that changed everything. I was walking past the hallway, headed to bring more napkins, when I heard his voice through the slightly ajar office door. "Don't talk to her about it," he said, low and urgent. "She'll just get ideas. Let Sophie handle it." "Handle what?" Mum's voice was tired, grief-stricken maybe, or just weary. "You know what? The house, the property, Claire doesn't need to worry about that stuff. She'll be fine." I froze, napkins clutched in my hands. "She'll be fine." Not "she deserves it" or "she earned it," just "she'll be fine." I backed away, quietly, pressing the napkins against my chest, as if they could stop the sudden pounding in it. It wasn't just about money, it was about recognition, about being seen. Growing up, I was the steady one, the helper, the one who stayed behind when Sophie went to college, when she moved to California, when she forgot birthdays and skipped family calls. I stayed, I cooked, I cleaned, I nursed Mum through chemo. I held Dad's hand when he collapsed in the garden, but Sophie was the golden one. She shone so brightly in everyone's eyes they couldn't see me standing in the same room. Later that night, at dinner, there wasn't a seat set for me. Not deliberately, I told myself. The table was just crowded. I could grab a stool. But the picture they took, the family photo at the head of the table, with Sophie holding Dad's arm and smiling like a debutante, I wasn't in it. They didn't even call me over. That night, I got a text from Sophie. "You know you won't keep the house, right? You don't have the skills or the money. Don't make this messy, Claire." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't reply. The next morning, I asked Mom directly, quietly, while she sipped tea in her room. "What's going to happen with the estate?" I asked. She looked up slowly, as if startled I'd even dare to ask. Then she smiled, that distant, fragile smile she'd used so often in recent years. "Everything will be okay," she said. I waited, but that was all she offered. Just a vague, empty reassurance. I left the room feeling like a ghost in my own life. Later, while sorting old boxes in the hallway closet, trying to find photo albums, I noticed a bump in the floor rug. Something hard beneath the woven threads. Curious, I lifted it and found a thin, weathered manila folder. No label, taped shut on one side. Inside, a scanned document, blurry but legible. It was a will. Mom's handwriting, and at the top, the date, 3 months before her diagnosis had worsened. My name was underlined. I reread it 3 times, barely breathing. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, folder still in hand. Sophie stood there, arms crossed. "What are you doing with that?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that feels like a knife just before it's pressed into skin. I didn't sleep that night. The folder sat under my pillow like a secret too fragile to leave in the open, but too heavy to ignore. I must have read the scanned will a dozen times. I knew that handwriting. I'd seen it on birthday cards, grocery lists, the notes Mum left on the fridge. And yet, some small, creeping doubt had already begun to nest in my mind. The next morning I brought it to her. She sat at the kitchen table, stirring her tea in slow, endless circles. When I laid the document in front of her, she didn't even blink. "Where did you find that?" she asked, too calm. "In the hallway closet," I said, "under the rug." She looked down at the page like it was written in another language. Then she shook her head. "That's not real. It's old. Probably something I scribbled and never meant to use. Your father took care of the will, remember? But it's dated 3 months before your diagnosis got worse." "I don't remember writing it," she said softly. Her tone wasn't defensive. It was vacant, like she wasn't really there. And for a terrifying moment, I wondered, what if she really didn't remember? What if I'd imagined the whole thing? Later that day, Sophie texted me, "I heard you found Mom's secret will. Cute. You always had an overactive imagination. Still, it's kind of adorable that you think you're special." I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to say something I wouldn't regret, but the words hit harder than I expected. I wasn't angry. I was unsure. Maybe I was imagining things. The next time we had guests over, some distant cousins and family friends, I noticed how often my name came up in hushed tones. "Claire's been so sensitive lately," someone whispered in the living room. "She's under a lot of stress," another replied. "She means well." They said it like I was a fragile lamp teetering on the edge of a shelf. Breakable. Embarrassing. A quiet problem to be managed. At dinner, I offered to pour wine. Sophie smiled at me, the kind of smile you give to toddlers, pretending to be helpful. "Thanks, Claire. That's sweet of you," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've always been generous with your time." I froze. I knew that tone. It sounded like praise, but landed like pity. That night I found Mom in the kitchen. She was alone, hunched over the sink, her shoulders trembling. "Are you okay?" I asked. She turned to me, eyes red, lips shaking. "I should have protected you," she whispered, but I made a promise. I had to keep it." I stepped closer. What promise? But she didn't answer, just turned back to the sink, letting the silence flood the room. The next day I started digging, bank statements, email logs, phone records, anything that might tell me what Sophie had been doing while I was busy changing bedpans and filling prescriptions. That's when I found the charges. Multiple large withdrawals from Mum's account, some during times when she'd been too ill to sign her name, transfers to accounts I didn't recognise, a trip to Aspen, designer handbags, private medical tests in a clinic Sophie never mentioned. I printed everything and tucked it into a separate folder. Later that week, I ran into Mrs. Kendall, the neighbour who used to bring Mom peach cobbler every Sunday. "She missed you," Mrs. Kendall said gently. "She talked about you a lot." I nodded, unsure how to respond. One night, not long before she passed, I heard her crying through the kitchen window. She kept saying, "Claire will never forgive me," over and over. Something cracked in my chest. I called Sophie that night. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I asked her to come over and talk. She agreed. The next day, before she arrived, I made a pot of tea and set 2 mugs on the table. I tried to stay calm, rational. I had a list of questions, but 10 minutes into our conversation, she pulled out her phone and pressed record, openly, without hiding it. "I'm recording this for my protection," she said, smiling, "just in case you get emotional." I told her what I'd found, the transfers, the discrepancies, the will. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look surprised. "I don't think you understand what you're accusing me of," she said sweetly. Later that night, I got an email. No subject line, just one sentence. "If you want the truth, come to the cemetery at midnight." The cemetery was quiet, swallowed in shadows and the occasional rustle of wind through brittle leaves. Midnight had always felt cinematic in theory, mysterious, dramatic. But that night it was cold, damp, and too real. I waited under the old sycamore tree near my mother's plot, gripping my coat tighter around me. I half expected no one to show up. Maybe the email was a prank, or worse, another psychological game Sophie set in motion. But then I saw her. She moved slowly, a slim figure in a grey coat, her white hair glowing faintly under the moonlight. "You must be Claire," she said, her voice soft and familiar in a way I couldn't place. "I am." She held out a folded envelope, yellowed and sealed with tape. "Your mother gave me this months ago, said I'd know when to deliver it." "Who are you?" "An old friend, college roommate. We lost touch for years, but she reached out after the diagnosis. She said she didn't trust anyone else." My fingers trembled as I took the envelope. It had my name in Mum's handwriting, delicate, shaky, but unmistakable. "I shouldn't stay long," the woman said. "Be careful, Claire." And just like that, she disappeared into the dark. I opened the letter in my car, with only the glove compartment light illuminating the words. "My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong. I never wanted you to bear the weight of what I couldn't say while I was alive. But Sophie found out something about your father, something I kept hidden to protect our family. She threatened to expose it unless I changed the will. I gave in. I was weak. I thought I was buying peace. But peace built on fear is no peace at all. I failed you, but I believe in you. You're stronger than you think. Fight for what's right. Love, Mum." I read it twice, 3 times. The words blurred from the tears that finally came. 2 days later, we met with the lawyer. Sophie arrived in a tailored suit, confident and composed. I came with the letter, the scanned will, and something else burning inside me, resolve. When I presented the document, Sophie laughed, actually laughed. "Claire, are we really doing this?" she said. "You found some old paper and think you have a case." "She has more than that," the lawyer said, eyes narrowing. "This handwriting, it matches previous legal forms from your mother." "I'm sure it's a coincidence," Sophie replied, voice dripping with mock concern. "Claire's been under a lot of stress. She's fragile." That word again. I stood up. "I have proof. A letter from Mom. She said you blackmailed her." Her face froze for a second, just a second. Then she smiled. "You're confused or you forged it. Either way, this is over." And that's when she pushed me. She stepped forward, fast and deliberate, both hands on my shoulders. I stumbled backward, crashing into the credenza behind me. My head hit something sharp. The room gasped. I saw stars. Blood dripped behind my ear. "Enough!" the lawyer shouted. Sophie stared down at me, eyes wide, chest heaving. She looked pleased. The assistant rushed to help me up. My vision swam. Then I realized there were cameras in the room. Sophie had to know that. Why would she attack me knowing she was being recorded? Unless she wanted to provoke a reaction, a meltdown, a scene she could spin into her favour. When the footage was requested for review the next day, something strange happened. The lawyer returned, pale and shaken. "We've received a formal order," he said, "from the board. All evidence review is to be suspended pending internal legal review." What does that mean? It means someone powerful wants this buried for now. The next 48 hours were hell. The video of the incident, somehow leaked and edited, was everywhere, but not the real video. No, this version showed only me shouting, blurred audio, and a cut right before the moment of impact. Headlines twisted the story. Unstable sister fakes assault in bizarre inheritance battle. My inbox exploded with hate. My work email was compromised. Spam, threats, mocking memes. My publisher postponed my upcoming release pending clarification of public concerns. I was losing everything. I stayed in bed for 3 days. Didn't eat, didn't speak. At night, I thought about the bridge. One small step and it would all stop. Then came the envelope. No return address, just my name. Inside, another letter from Mom. "If you're thinking about ending your story here, don't. I didn't raise you to surrender. You are my daughter. You are the legacy I'm proudest of. Don't give her what she wants, your silence. Fight, Claire, even if no one believes you yet. I do." Taped to the letter was a tiny USB. I plugged it into my laptop with trembling hands. It was an audio file, Mum's voice, speaking slowly, carefully. "This is my final statement. If Claire doesn't receive the house, I want the truth known. Sophie manipulated me. Claire was always the one I trusted. If she doesn't get what's hers, I won't rest in peace." The next morning, I filed an independent civil suit. I'd spent the entire night awake, scouring documents, cross-checking bank transactions, organising emails, audio files, and every small piece of evidence I'd collected over the years, without realising I'd need them one day. My kitchen table looked like the desk of a seasoned investigator. I wasn't Claire, the dutiful daughter, anymore. I was Claire, the plaintiff. A handwriting expert confirmed the will, and the letter from my mother were undeniably hers. Her voice, steady and distinct in the recording, matched other known samples. I forwarded everything to my attorney, including the bank records showing Sophie's transfers and the text messages dripping with condescension. The look on my lawyer's face said it all. "This is bigger than you think," he told me. But I already knew. Still, I needed more than proof. I needed people, support, validation. That's how I found them. In a dimly lit community centre downtown, tucked between a laundromat and a second-hand bookstore, I met 5 women, all in different stages of grief, loss and litigation, all with eerily similar stories. Their names were Lena, Maria, Judith, Hannah and Elise. One had lost her parents' farm after her brother manipulated their mother into changing the will. Another had been cut out of the estate entirely for calling out elder abuse. They cried when I told them mine. I cried too. "I thought I was crazy," Maria whispered. "I thought maybe I deserved it," I nodded. "Me too." But sitting there, shoulders squared, stories shared, I stopped thinking like a victim. I started thinking like a survivor, and then like a fighter. I launched a campaign, not just for me, for every forgotten caregiver, every daughter who stayed behind while the golden child conquered the world and returned only to claim what they never earned. I posted my story, carefully worded, facts documented, names redacted. Within days it went viral. People reached out, strangers, women, men, children of aging parents, lawyers, journalists. They shared my post, added their own stories, and the hashtag emerged like wildfire. Justice for Claire. I was asked to speak on a podcast, then another, then a live-streamed panel on caregiver rights and inheritance fraud. My voice cracked during the first interview, but by the third I was steady. Purpose had replaced fear. While preparing a timeline of events for court, a manila envelope slid through my mail slot. No return address. Inside, a typed letter and photocopied documents. It detailed another case, an eerily similar inheritance dispute that took place 5 years ago. The defendant, Sophie, in a different state, same pattern, same manipulation. A confidential settlement had sealed the records. She had done this before. I stared at the letter for a long time, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and grim satisfaction. She wasn't just cruel, she was calculated. I added the documents to my file. I wasn't the first, but I'd make damn sure I was the last. We tracked down the lawyer who'd represented Sophie in that case. He'd been disbarred 2 years ago for ethics violations. It took some digging, but we got a statement from the opposing party, sealed under NDA, but the timeline and facts lined up with my case. My lawyer smiled. This is gold. The internet kept buzzing. Articles appeared, think pieces, threads on Reddit dissected every development in what was now being called the Sister Claus case. People argued, debated, defended, and condemned. But the noise no longer scared me, because beneath it all, the truth was growing louder. And then Sophie reached out. Not with an apology, not with a confession, with a settlement offer, wrapped in legal language, polite enough on the surface, but unmistakably venomous underneath. She'd graciously agreed to mediation if I dropped all public statements and withdrew the lawsuit. My lawyer barely glanced at it before handing it back, but I wasn't done reading, because tucked behind the official letter was another envelope. Stamped court summons. Sophie was suing me for defamation. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not the temperature, though the air conditioning hummed with unnecessary force, but the atmosphere. Silent, watching, waiting. This wasn't just a legal hearing anymore, it was a stage. And both Sophie and I had taken our places under the lights. The judge entered and the trial began. Testimonies came first. Mine, from neighbours, from the handwriting expert, from the financial investigator who traced the bank transfers. Everything I'd collected over months now stood in folders, lined along our table like soldiers. The recording of my mother's voice was played, her words cracking through the speakers. "If Claire doesn't get what's hers, I won't rest in peace." Gasps rippled through the room. Sophie sat across from me, jaw tight, one leg crossed casually over the other. Her lawyer, a sharp man with a sharper suit, smiled like he knew how this would end. And then they called me to the stand. "Ms. Whitmore," he began, "you've endured quite a lot these past months, haven't you?" I nodded, wary. "Would you say your mental state has been unstable?" A pause. "I've been hurt," I said clearly. "But being hurt doesn't mean I'm lying." He smiled again, rehearsed and calculated. "You've said your sister manipulated your mother into changing the will. Can you prove that, beyond these emotional documents?" "I have financial records," I said. "Witnesses, my mother's own words." Yes, we've seen. But let's focus on you. Is it possible that you misinterpreted things in your grief?" I leaned forward. "I interpreted them as her daughter, as the person who took care of her while she died. I was there. Sophie wasn't." Silence fell. Sophie's eyes flickered for a moment. The mask cracked. Then the unexpected happened. The clerk entered the room mid-session, holding a small sealed envelope, which she handed to the judge. His brows furrowed. He opened it, read silently, then looked up. "We've received the original handwritten will, an anonymous submission, with a notarized date preceding the contested version." Everyone shifted. Sophie stiffened. The judge placed the envelope on the bench, pulling the folded paper from inside. He scanned the page, then paused. "There's a note in the margin," he said, voice low but clear, written in the same hand. It says, "Claire deserves the garden." Gasps again, and then silence so thick it could be carved. Sophie's face drained of colour. She knew what that meant. The garden wasn't just a flower bed. It was the heart of our home, the one place our mother spent her happiest, most lucid days. To her, it meant inheritance in spirit, her legacy. The judge cleared his throat. "This court will reconvene tomorrow with a final ruling." Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. I didn't speak to them. I went home, alone, and sat in the garden. The roses were in bloom, wild and defiant. The next day, the courtroom was packed. The judge's decision came quickly, formally. The court finds the original will valid. Ms. Claire Whitmore is the sole beneficiary of the family estate. Ms. Sophie Whitmore is hereby removed from any claim to the property, assets, or holdings of the deceased. A sound, half scream, half sob, escaped Sophie's throat. She stood, shaking, and pointed at the judge. "This isn't justice. My mother, she didn't know what she was doing. Claire poisoned her against me. She was sick. She was always sick." The judge banged his gavel. "Order!" But Sophie wouldn't stop. She turned toward me, tears streaming, eyes burning. "You ruined everything. You always wanted to be the favourite. Fine. Now you can rot in that empty house, alone, just like you were your whole life." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The silence around us was louder than anything she could scream. People began to leave. Some shook my hand. Others nodded. A few avoided my gaze. But I felt it. The shift. Sophie's allies were gone. Word spread quickly. Friends stopped returning her calls. Her employer quietly let her go. The influencer deals, the charity boards, the brunch circles, they disappeared. Not because I ruined her, because she revealed herself. Some enemies can't be beaten with fists, only with the truth. The verdict had barely settled when I received a message. An unfamiliar voice on my voicemail. "Hi, I think I'm your brother. We share the same father. I have something to tell you. About your mother. About what she never said out loud. It's important." 6 months after the verdict, the house no longer felt like a battlefield. It had been stripped down, cleaned out, walls repainted, and furniture rearranged, not to erase the past, but to reclaim the space. Where my mother's hospice bed once stood, now sat a large oak desk, piled with case files, brochures, and a ceramic mug that read, "Daughters aren't disposable." I turned the house into something new, a legal aid centre for people like me, people who stayed behind, people who gave everything and were told they had no right to want anything back. We called it the Garden. It wasn't just a name, it was a vow. Every week, women walked through the door, timid at first, carrying thick folders, tear-stained affidavits, broken voices. We offered help, real help, free consultations, emotional support, connections to legal representation in all 50 states. Some left with hope, some came back with verdicts. Lena from the support group joined as a volunteer. Judith started an online forum that grew faster than any of us expected. Hannah spoke on national television. Our names were no longer whispers behind closed doors. We were loud and proud and visible. Sophie disappeared. The last we heard, she'd moved out of state. Several pending legal investigations had been opened into her previous dealings. She was removed from 3 non-profit boards. Her once flourishing online presence dried up to silence. But I didn't celebrate. It didn't feel like victory. Just justice. And even justice doesn't always taste sweet. I still visited the garden every morning. There, beside the wild roses and the lavender Mum used to tend, I felt the closest to her. Not to the version of her that folded under pressure, but to the woman who'd written letters when her voice had been stolen. To the woman who, even in her final moments, tried to protect what was good. One morning, I found an email in the centre's inbox. No subject line. No sender. Just one line. Your story isn't over. I stared at the screen unsettled. Was it a threat, a promise, or maybe a reminder? That evening I started writing. It began as a journal, then an essay, then a manuscript. I called it Blood Doesn't Inherit Love. It wasn't just my story. It was every story. I wove in interviews, testimonials, court records, pieces of broken families, and fragments of hard-won healing. The book hit shelves 3 months later. Within 2 weeks, it was a bestseller. People didn't just read it, they carried it, underlined passages, cried over chapters, wrote to me. One woman messaged, "I thought I was crazy. You showed me I'm not." Another, "Your courage gave me the words I never had." Through all of this, I found what I never knew I needed, a family of choice. Lena and I shared Thanksgiving together, side by side at a table surrounded by volunteers and survivors. Judith brought pie, Maria brought wine. We laughed more than we cried. I looked around the table that night and realized something. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shows up. In early December, I returned to the backyard alone. Snow had dusted the lawn like powdered sugar, softening the edges of everything. Most plants had withered. Most trees stood bare. But in the centre of the garden where my mother used to kneel with her gloves and spade, something small and vibrant pushed through the frost. A single yellow tulip, blooming, alive. I dropped to my knees beside it, brushing the snow away gently. It didn't make sense, not in this weather. But maybe healing doesn't either. Maybe healing comes not when it's convenient, but when it's needed most. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, and whispered, "Thank you." Maybe to the earth, maybe to her, maybe to the girl I used to be, the one who stayed quiet, who bent herself to fit into shadows, who finally stepped into the light. If you've ever felt like your pain wasn't real because no one else could see it, know this. Your story matters, your voice matters, your truth matters. And sometimes a soul once trampled becomes the lantern for others still crawling in the dark.